It's time for this month's Listener's Choice episode. This time we're going to be diving deep into Queensland, then the LGA of Moreton Bay, and finally the specific suburb you guys have sent in.
Queensland's had the third highest population growth amongst all states.
InvestorKit's lead research analyst and founder Arjun Paliwal dives into Queensland's data to share whether it's a go or a no.
We had Queensland having the fastest job growth, up 4.6%. Gross state product was another one. FY 22-23 grew by 2.3%. We've got a great thing going on for Queensland at the moment. Whilst we expect it to grow now, it can't keep on keeping on forever.
This is almost a little bit of coincidence.
In this suburb, you're likely to have some.
So if you've been looking into investing in Queensland, or more specifically the Moreton Bay region, you're going to enjoy this episode. My name's Todd Sloan. This is the Pizza and Property Podcast, and you're listening to my chat with Arjun Paliwal. Arjun Paliwal. How long's it been now?
I'd say a few months, maybe even 2 to 3 months now. So I'm 10 weeks post-recovery at the time of this recording. So 2 to 3 months post.
You feeling good?
Feeling much better. Still a little bit sore and here and there, but overall much better.
Mate, you've been through an incredible ordeal and you're coming out swinging. And I know there's a lot of people happy to have you back on the show. It's been awesome chatting with Jung, but we've actually got you to do our first Listener's Choice in quite a while. And the Listener's Choice we've had sent in has been sent in from Jason. And Jason's looking at Warner in Queensland. Now, I want to actually read out Jason's question. It's short, sharp, and to the point. Looking for a house for a long-term set and forget investment. We don't have a price range. We just long-term, set and forget. Thank you very much for sending that in, Jason. And if you guys have got an area that you want a deep dive done on by either Arjun or Jung, make sure to click the link in the show notes below and tell us a little bit more about it. The more info you give us, the more Arj can really, customize more of an answer for you. But before we get into it, we're going state level Queensland, then looking at the LGA, then jumping right into Warner itself. Why don't we start with the state of Queensland?
We've got a great thing going on for Queensland at the moment. So the first thing Queensland's had is the third highest population growth amongst all states for that whole calendar year of the year just been, with about 2.62% in rise. Some other things that are going on pretty well is we've also been seeing a lot of interstate migration continue on in Queensland, which no doubt's been popular as well for some time from a state level.
Yeah, it's always been the place to kind of go run away from the war, a bit of retirement, but you're saying that that's been higher than normal?
Yeah, it's been higher than normal, definitely. And other things to say that even though it's been higher than normal, it's not like the numbers in the tens of thousands. It's still a small number because interstate migration doesn't come in huge waves as people think. But in terms of the wave of growth in Queensland, also from an economic point, we should call that out. So unemployment rates at Queensland have been about 3.8%, so quite low in the grand scheme of things. In the July 2024 issue of CommSec State of the State, their economic reviews, we had Queensland having the fastest job growth, up 4.6%. And WA was up 4% and Vic up 3%. So Queensland was the leader in terms of jobs growth as a percentage.
What do you reckon's fueling it?
Look, there were a few categories that were moving quite well, so you couldn't put it down to just one. But in terms of jobs growth in Queensland, it's been widespread. And so there's been a few industries picking up. Now, gross state product was another one. So FY 22-23 grew by 2.3%. But that is lag data, so it doesn't really show that 2024 conditions as much as it should.
Okay.
But really from a fast economic growth, wage growth, job growth, these things were all scoring pretty high in Queensland. So that's probably the first thing to talk about if we're looking at just Queensland, is the job market there is improving a lot.
Okay. Before we get into the LGA level of Warner, is there anything else you want to talk about in Queensland?
Look, I'd say that from a perspective of Queensland, outside of Perth and WA, in terms of a percentage growth of the state for house prices. Like if we have a look, Brisbane's 2024 last 12-month growth is 15.2%.
That's smashing it.
Right? Only second to Perth.
Yep.
And then you've got rest of Queensland's 2024 annual growth. I know it's a long list of cities, the rest of Queensland, but it's up 12%, only second to WA. And so that just means that Queensland's very much up there from a capital growth perspective, and anyone who invested over the last 12 months in majority of the cities would have seen double-digit capital growth as a percentage, whilst the national market's only moved up 8%.
So pretty much if you put your money there 12 months ago, you're a happy camper.
Absolutely. And you could argue even today.
Well, that's what I was about to say. Is it still that way looking forward already, just from a state level, before we get down to Warner as a suburb level? State level moving forward for Queensland, everything's still looking in the right direction?
Still looking in the right direction. We've got economic growth that's healthy. We've got job and wage growth that's healthy. It's still relatively affordable in comparison to many other locations and states. And the month-on-month growth rates, if you're looking at that short-term view, are still quite strong.
Okay. What about if we go to the LGA?
Yeah, so LGA, Moreton Bay is an interesting one. Moreton Bay is the LGA, but if you use SA3 levels, which is another way to cut the data, it's called the Hills District, which is the smaller than Moreton Bay region. So it's like kind of the region within the region.
Okay.
But if we're using Moreton Bay LGA, the first thing to point out is population growth is okay, 1.64% year-on-year growth. It's a little bit less than the greater Brisbane statistics. So like if you include the Ipswiches, the Logans and things, there's a bit more people movement happening in those areas. From an internal migration perspective, it is a little bit down in terms of that region of Brisbane. And so there have been less people coming in internally into that from a different state. Regional Queensland seems to score a lot better than Brisbane does when you look at that internal migration. There are a lot of more people moving towards the GC and other parts like that. Unemployment rates, okay, a little bit above the national average in that LGA, so about 5.4%, but still okay from a grand scheme of things. And from a cycle perspective for growth, Brisbane is no sort of slouch in performance over the last 10 years. So Brisbane as a greater region has done 82.2% over the last 10 years. That's greater Brisbane. But when we look at this LGA, it's done 92.4%, so a little bit more. That's not massive when you break that down from a 10-year to a year-by-year basis.
Yeah, I guess we're talking not even 1% a year.
Yeah, not even 1% a year, but that usually happens. When the city grows, like select parts of the cities don't grow way more than others. Like they do grow similarly when a boom is happening.
Yep.
And in this case, that's the case there, but Moreton Bay slightly edging it. I think the main thing to say is that the last 10-year growth rates of 92.4% have been above the long-term averages. So whilst we expect it to grow now, it can't keep on keeping on forever. So that's probably the only thing I would say.
And Moreton Bay, out of an LGA, if you were to like look at like Ippy, Logan, and Moreton Bay, like the three main ones there outside of Brisbane, do you ever like look at those and kind of really classify like, yep, I'd be putting my money here over here as far as the LGA level? Or is it like it's too big anyway, I still go suburb level?
Yeah, actually, it's a good question. So you have to go down suburb level as the next choice anyway, because when you're touching an LGA and you're going towards a house, you're going to have to find which suburb that house is in. So I think you'll get there anyway. But in terms of, is there a vast difference in performance in a short-term or medium-term period based on the LGAs? The answer is not so much LGA based. The answer is price quartile based.
Okay.
And what that means is like affordable properties, say 700K and below versus 700K to 1.4 mil versus maybe 1.4 mil to 2.5 mil. And these are just selected numbers. But the main thing is that lower quartile of the sub 700K has been performing better in Brisbane in recent times. And so what I would say is as a result of that price performing well, it just so happens that the Ipswich, Moreton Bay and Logan Council, the three outer parts, happen to do well. So when you're looking at performance, I wouldn't say, oh, we must go for these councils because they're doing better. I would say that right now, the price points across Australia have largely been centered to more affordable ones being better. And it just so happens that these ones are more affordable. That's all.
This is almost a little bit of coincidence.
Yeah, you could say that. I guess like I think at the end of the day, it's more just during this high interest rate period, a lot of people have had their forced borrowing capacities shift to more affordable areas. Even those on higher incomes have had their money moved to sort of middle and outer rings as a result. And so I just think that these areas are benefiting from that.
Okay. Anything else that you want to say about Moreton Bay before we actually move down to the suburb level of Warner?
Yeah, look, I think Moreton Bay has a lot going for it. So if we just look at a few property level data for Moreton Bay, the first thing is vacancy rates are about 0.4%, so extremely low.
Really low,
We've got housing inventory at about 2 months of stock, so extremely tight supplied. And also that number's declined by 30% over the last 12 months.
And just for anyone that's a little bit newer and don't know what inventory is or how, like what's good, what's bad, is it 3 to 4 months is balanced?
Yeah, that's about right. And what it means is essentially if you had, say, 30 listings in an area and on average 10 per month were selling, it would take 3 months if no new listings came on to clear all the supply in that area. And so you grab that monthly average, you grab what's available stock in there, and you use this months of stock calculation. So in this case, it's 2 months of stock, which means hypothetically, if there were 20 houses for sale in Moreton Bay, they would be sold in 2 months if no more listings came on.
So 2, pretty good score.
2's a really good score. And it's declining. So we look at trend and where the data is, it's declining by 30% over the last sort of 12 months, which means that there's an improved level of pressure in this area. On top of that, days on market, the time to sell, has also been declining. 43 days declined by 14% over the last year. And when it comes to price growth, has lagged a little bit in comparison to Greater Brisbane just in the last 12 months. So Brisbane's done 13%, depending on which data set you take a look at, up to about 15%. And then you look at the last 12 months for this region, it's about 7.4%. So it's done a little bit less than the actual Greater Brisbane region has. But rental growth's been in line with the Greater Brisbane region, and building supply hasn't been too high either from the recent trends that we're seeing.
And it's just same kind of thing everywhere. It's like buildings are a lot riskier. It's a lot more expensive. Just buy up stock that's existing for a better price. Don't have to run the gauntlet. Is that kind of...
That's been the clear sort of consensus for everyone when they're making decisions. And you can see that in the building costs and all the builders that are going through some issues as well. Now,
if we're fully focused into Warner, what are we looking at, especially for someone wanting to look for a house, long-term set and forget investment? Well, not someone, Jason.
So Jason, I think it's ticking all the boxes of a long-term set and forget. You can see here inventories at 2.3 months and it's declining. Days on market's 57% lower than this time last year. So obviously a big switch to making it faster, and 18 days, which is much tighter than the Greater Brisbane average. Vacancy rate's extremely tight at 0.4%.
So did you say days on market is 18 or 57?
18 here.
Where did
much tighter.
From? Is it 18? That's super tight. Yeah, okay.
So this is for Warner itself, right?
Warner itself, yep. Gotcha.
Price growth itself has been about 10.5%. So it's been a better performer in the Moreton Bay region. And yield is higher than the Moreton Bay region yield. So Moreton Bay region yield is about 3.62%, whilst Warner has been at 4.2%. And with median prices at sort of 870K, to have a yield of 4.2 is quite healthy. Like that's quite rare. Usually they'd be in the threes for most areas with yields like prices like that. So yeah, overall, I think when you're looking at a long-term hold, I'd expect also Warner properties to be pretty modern, pretty well kept based on that suburb and my local knowledge of it, from when I've traveled out there many times it is. I would say that it looks like a tick all the boxes from a long-term set and forget, but I would say that, you're kind of grabbing whatever's left in the tank of price growth. You're not grabbing the whole cycle ahead of you, only because Brisbane, like many other capital cities, has had a good run over the last few years.
When it's overtaken Melbourne now, and I know that I don't even want to get into the Melbourne subject, but just from that level of it was like one of the most affordable places you could move to only 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's in the top 3 as far as price category?
Yeah.
So as far as what's left in the tank, I thought you were about to lean towards it's a go, not a no. But would this be a no then?
No, it's still a go, because the question he asked was around a long-term set and forget. And when you've got a long-term set and forget, you've got still an affordable price property. You've got healthy rental yields. In this suburb, you're likely to have some modern price properties. You've got modern properties. You're likely to have a state economy that's looking pretty solid. And at the same time, you've got trends that are healthy in the short term. It seems to be easy to find a tenant with vacancy rates that are quite tight. People are buying it with a hotly contested suburb. So it's obviously popular to the local markets because, the LGA days on market was 43 and the suburb days on market's 18. So people like the suburb more within the LGA in comparison to others. And so if you're looking at all of that, it looks like it'll hold its place long term almost throughout when you see these metrics. But from a short-term perspective, you are grabbing what's left. Meaning if he's trying to get this huge wave of growth to outperform, can it happen for a year, 2 years, 3 years? It's anyone's guess. You just have to keep looking at these short-term metrics all the time to forecast that next 12 months. But I'd say the next 12 months look healthy. You could expect somewhere between sort of 7 to 10% growth at a high level when you see inventory that tight. But I would say that it's truly a long-term set and forget, not something that will keep blowing the lights out after doing 92% already.
Well, and with a 4.2% rental yield, it sounds like it's going to be a bit healthier to hold long-term as well. You're not going to be crazy negatively geared. Obviously, it depends on what happens with interest rates as well and LVRs and the rest of it to come into play. But so you're basically saying there should be a bit of growth in the next kind of 12 months, but he's not going to be shooting the lights out, doubling his money anytime soon.
Yeah, not anytime soon. It can't happen every single year and keep going like that because of how much growth has happened in Brisbane. But I think it's still a good long-term set and forget hold if that's what he's after.
Awesome. Jason, I hope that answers your question, mate. And like I said, if you guys have got a question you want unpacked by the big man himself, make sure to click the link in the show notes below. Tell us everything that you want to know about an area, property, whatever it is. And if it's chosen, then Arjun will pull it apart, unless Jung's back on the show, whichever way it's going to work. But Arjun Paliwal from InvestorKit, thank you so much for jumping on the show again, mate. Always appreciate having you on.
Always good to be on. Thank you so much, Jason, for the question as well.